Welcome to today's deep dive. Usually when you think about fixing a blocked pipe, there's this expectation of like brute force.
Right. Oh, absolutely. It is all about just applying pressure.
Right. Like if your kitchen sink is backed up, the plumber comes in, they shove a rigid metal snake down the drain, and they just physically force that blockage out of the way.
Yeah, it is a very aggressive, very static solution to a mechanical problem. I mean, the pipe is inanimate, so it can handle that kind of blunt trauma.
Exactly. You push hard enough and the obstruction clears. But then, you step into the world of human biology.
Right, which is a completely different ballgame.
It really is. Specifically when you are dealing with malignant obstructions, so blockages caused by cancer growing inside the body, that whole plumbing metaphor just completely falls apart.
It really does. You are looking at an environment that is fragile, dynamic, and frankly, deeply unforgiving.
Yeah, you cannot just shove a rigid metal pipe into someone's digestive tract.
No. That is the absolute definition of a high-stakes engineering challenge. I mean,
Wow.
you are operating inside living tissue.
Right, with blood flow and nerve endings?
Exactly. The pipe in question has a highly delicate cellular structure. If you apply the blunt force of a plumber's snake to a living organ, you are going to cause catastrophic damage.
And that tension, that push and pull between physical engineering and biological fragility is our mission for today.
It is a fascinating topic.
It really is. So we are exploring this amazing medical device called the self-expanding metal stent. And to guide us, we are drawing directly from a remarkably detailed procedural breakdown in a YouTube video.
Is a great resource.
Yeah, it is titled HCC 1475-40 esophageal stent, and it was uploaded by the channel Gautamukala S. Raju.
Dr. Raju's breakdown is just incredibly precise.
Right. The video lays out the exact mechanical choreography, but also the wildly complex biological realities of how these stents are deployed inside a patient.
And what is so fascinating here is how this single source really captures both the sheer elegance of the medical engineering and the highly paradoxical ways the human body reacts to it.
Paradoxical is the perfect word for it.
Yeah, it is a perfect microcosm of physics colliding with biology. I mean, you are looking at a static piece of metal being placed into an ever-changing organic landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with just the sheer versatility of this device.
It is surprisingly adaptable.
Right. Dr. Raju's breakdown highlights that these self-expanding metal stents, or SIMs as they are called, are used primarily for the relief of malignant obstructions.
Yes.
But what really caught my eye was the geographic range of where they actually put them inside the body.
Oh, it is all over the place.
Yeah. The list includes the esophagus, the bile duct, the duodenum, and the colon.
And that list is crucial to fully appreciate the engineering at play here. Think about the wildly different physiological neighborhoods we are talking about.
Right. They are not even remotely similar.
Not at all. The esophagus is this muscular tube actively pushing food from your throat to your stomach. But then the bile duct is a tiny, delicate channel carrying fluid from your liver.
Wow. Okay.
And the duodenum is the very first section of your small intestine, which is dealing with heavy chemical digestion.
Right.
And the colon is the large intestine, essentially the body's waste management system.
So they handle completely different materials. They have entirely different widths, different muscle tones.
Even totally different daily functions, yeah.
Yet the exact same mechanical concept, this self-expanding metal stent, is the universal answer to a blockage in literally any of them.
It is brilliant when you think about it.
It really is. Imagine a collapsed tunnel blocking a vital highway. This device isn't just a rigid piece of scaffolding shoved into the rubble.
No, it is much more elegant than that.
It is a dynamic, compressed structure designed to open itself up once it reaches the exact right spot.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you really begin to appreciate the brilliance of the underlying design philosophy. I mean, the fundamental problem across all those distinct anatomical locations is identical.
Which is that a tumor is blocking the way.
Exactly. A malignant tumor has grown and squeezed a vital passageway shut. Therefore, the fundamental solution remains the same. You must deliver a compacted force into that narrowed space.
Right.
A force that can gently but persistently push back outward from the inside.
Gently but persistently. I love that phrasing.
It is really accurate, too.
Yeah, it is not a battering ram breaking down a door.
Yeah.
It is a spring slowly reclaiming its space.
You are relying entirely on the metal's memory. So the stent is manufactured to exist at a certain diameter, right? And then it is artificially compressed into a tiny delivery tube.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Its physical desire to expand back to its original manufactured shape is what does the heavy lifting.
That is so cool.
That outward radial force is what keeps the passage open, whether it is surrounded by the heavy muscle of the esophagus or the incredibly delicate tissue of the bile duct.
So how do you actually get a compacted spring down a human throat without it just snapping open prematurely?
That is the tricky part.
Right. The source uses an esophageal cancer obstruction as the primary example to walk us through the deployment procedure. And it is this fascinating multi-step sequence.
It is highly choreographed.
Yeah. First off, you picture the patient placed under general anesthesia. They are lying in a supine position, so flat on their back on a fluoroscopy table.
And that fluoroscopy table is the unsung hero of this entire operation.
Wait, what exactly does it do?
Well, fluoroscopy is essentially a continuous, real-time X-ray movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it allows the medical team to see inside the patient's chest and abdomen dynamically. They are literally watching the instruments navigate the twists and turns of the digestive tract as it happens.
Okay, so the patient is asleep, flat on their back, and the live X-ray camera is rolling. The first thing the medical team does is insert an endoscope, which is basically a flexible tube with a tiny camera and a light on the end.
Right. It is their eyes on the ground.
So using that direct visual from the camera, the doctor carefully navigates down the esophagus to locate the stricture.
And the stricture is the actual narrowing the bottleneck caused by the tumor pressing inward.
Right. Once they find that exact bottleneck, they pass a thin guide wire entirely across the stricture.
Threading the needle.
Yeah, essentially threading the needle right through the tightest, most dangerous part of the blockage.
Setting that guide wire is the foundational step upon which the entire procedure rests. Everything else that is about to happen relies entirely on the precise physical path established by that single, thin, flexible wire.
It is that important.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Think of it as laying down a monorail track through a collapsed mountain tunnel. The actual train, the stent, needs that track to know where to go.
Here is where it gets really interesting, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at the steps in Dr. Raju's video, and once that guide wire is successfully passed through the tumor, they actually take the endoscope out.
They do.
They completely remove the camera from the patient's body.
It sounds crazy, right?
It does. You are certainly relying entirely on that thin guide wire and the black and white X-ray shadows on the fluoroscopy screen over the table.
Yep.
Why would you purposefully blindfold yourself right before the most crucial step of delivering the stent?
I know. It feels incredibly counterintuitive to remove your direct line of sight. But you have to remember the harsh physical realities of the stricture itself.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, a malignant tumor causing an obstruction has narrowed the esophageal passageway significantly. Often, it is squeezed down to the width of a drinking straw.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. There simply is not enough physical room to have the endoscope camera and the bulky stent delivery system passing through that severely narrowed gap at the exact same time. The space is entirely compromised.
Oh, I see. You are essentially trying to force two garden hoses through a pipe that can barely fit a pencil.
Precisely the issue. It physically will not work.
Right, right.
So the camera goes in first as a scout. It surveys the hostile terrain, finds the tiny opening, and lays down the track the guide wire.
And then it gets out of the way.
Exactly. Once that track is utterly secure, the camera has to back all the way out to make physical room for the actual cargo.
A cargo, of course, being the stent itself.
Yes.
The procedural notes emphasize that the stent is tightly compressed inside an outer envelope. It is slid over that guide wire and pushed right down into the center of the stricture.
Right into the danger zone.
Yeah. The unexpanded stent is now sitting exactly where the tumor is squeezing the esophagus the tightest.
And this is the moment where the mechanical choreography has to be absolutely meticulous. The delivery system is in perfect position, straddling the tumor. But the stent is still highly constrained by that rigid outer envelope.
Right.
It is a coiled spring begging to open up, but it is trapped.
So the physician then begins to pull that outer envelope back. But the source explicitly stresses that it must be pulled back slowly.
Very slowly.
As that enclosing envelope is gradually removed, millimeter by millimeter, the metal stent is freed. It self-expands, opening up like a metallic flower, pressing outward against the tumor and physically forcing the passageway open.
It is quite a visual.
Yeah. Finally, the empty envelope and the guide wire are withdrawn, leaving only the expanded stent behind.
And that emphasis on pulling the outer envelope back slowly cannot be overstated.
Really? Why is that so critical?
Well, without the direct visual feedback of the endoscope camera, The physician is relying heavily on the tactile feel of the wire and those two-dimensional shadows on the fluoroscopy screen.
Right, because they are essentially flying blind at this point.
Exactly. If you rush and pull that envelope back too quickly, the stent might deploy unevenly. Or, even more disastrously, it could deploy slightly too high or too low.
And you can't exactly stuff the genie back into the bottle.
You really can't.
Once that metal spring's open, it's open.
Yeah, it is designed specifically to grip the muscular walls of the esophagus with immense friction to stay in place.
Oh, wow.
If it expands fully in the wrong anatomical spot, adjusting it or pulling it back out becomes a massive, dangerous challenge. It can easily tear the tissue.
That sounds terrifying.
So it must be a slow, highly controlled, phased release to ensure it anchors exactly where it needs to.
It really is a high-stakes mechanical ballet.
That is a great way to put it.
But of course, once that delivery system is successfully removed, the purely mechanical part of the procedure is over.
Right.
And that is when the immediate physiological reaction for the patient's living body begins. We are transitioning from a problem of mechanics to a problem of biology.
Yes.
And honestly, the immediate aftermath sounds quite intense for the patient.
Oh, it is. The human body does not ignore a sudden, forceful change to its internal geometry. We are talking about a significant anatomical disruption.
So what does this all mean for the patient waking up from anesthesia? Dr. Raju's breakdown lists several immediate complications to watch for. The first one that jumped off the page at me is severe chest pain. And the text notes specifically that this happens as the stent expands. Picture this happening in your own chest. It is literally like breaking in a stiff, unforgiving new pair of shoes, but happening inside your esophageal tract.
It is a visceral image, but a highly accurate one.
Yeah.
The stent is a foreign metallic object. It is exerting continuous, relentless, outward radial force against the esophageal wall.
Which is living tissue.
Exactly. It is entirely made of sensitive living muscle, and it is pressing against the hardened mass of the tumor itself. The tissue is being forcibly stretched.
Oh, that sounds so painful.
Countless nerve endings are being suddenly and aggressively stimulated. It is a highly effective mechanical way to clear the obstruction, but that very mechanism of action, the outward pressure, is exactly what generates the intense discomfort.
Wow.
The pain is, ironically, proof that the device is doing its job.
That makes total sense when you visualize the physics involved.
Yeah.
The source also mentions a serious risk of aspiration, which is the danger of accidentally inhaling food or fluid into the lungs instead of safely swallowing it down to the stomach.
Because the normal swallowing mechanics have been structurally altered.
Exactly. But the complication that I found most fascinating, mostly because it comes down strictly to anatomical bad luck, is acid reflux.
The G-junction complication.
Yes.
This is a brilliant, if unfortunate, example of how solving one medical problem can mechanically induce an entirely new one.
Let's look at the mechanics of this. The video states that if the stent has to be placed close to the G-junction, it can allow stomach contents to reflux violently up into the esophagus.
Yeah.
Let's break down the anatomy for a second. The G-junction stands for the gastroesophageal junction. It is the literal doorway between the bottom of the esophagus and the top of the stomach.
And under healthy, normal circumstances, that doorway acts as a highly specialized physiological valve.
It is a one-way street, right?
Exactly. It actively relaxes and opens up to allow chewed food to drop safely into the stomach basin. Then, it tightly and instinctively clamps shut.
To keep the acid down.
Yes. That tight seal is vital because it keeps the highly corrosive pool of stomach acid from splashing back up into the delicate, unprotected lining of the lower esophagus.
But consider the geography of the cancer. If the malignant tumor happens to be located right at that specific doorway, right straddling the G-junction, the doctor has no choice. The stent has to be placed precisely there to keep the path open so the patient can actually eat.
And this is where the design of the device clashes with the body's natural architecture. A standard self-expanding metal stent does not have an intelligent muscular valve built into it.
Right, it's just a pipe.
It is just an open, static metal tube. So if the stent bridges directly across that G-junction, it essentially wedges the doorway permanently open.
You successfully fix the deadly blockage, but you completely disable the body's natural one-way security door in the process.
The biological barrier is totally eradicated. Because that stent is holding the muscle open, the highly acidic, churning contents of the stomach now have a completely unobstructed, wide-open pathway to wash back up into the lower esophagus every time the patient lies down or bends over.
Oh, that sounds miserable.
It causes severe chronic acid reflux. It isn't a failure of the procedure. It is a direct, unavoidable mechanical consequence of the patient's specific anatomy and the geographic placement of the device.
It really highlights the harsh trade-offs required in medicine. You are actively trading a life-threatening inability to swallow for a severe quality-of-life issue like chronic reflux, simply because of where the tumor chose to grow.
It is a tough hand to be dealt.
It really is.
Yeah.
But that immediate aftermath, the intense chest pain as the metal expands, the sudden onset of reflux is really just the opening skirmish.
Just the beginning.
Yeah. The procedural breakdown moves on to what I would call the long-term slow-motion battle. Stents versus tumors.
And this raised an important question for me while reviewing the material. We tend to view these procedures as a final fix.
Like problem solved, right?
Exactly. But this phase reveals the truly dynamic, shifting nature of a malignant disease. The stent is a static piece of metal engineering. It has one job: stay open.
Right.
But the tumor and the living tissue surrounding it is constantly reacting, growing, weakening, and changing shape.
The first long-term risk the video details is perforation,
Which is very serious.
The notes indicate that sometimes, if the esophageal wall is too weak, the stent can actually perforate it, meaning the metal pushes outward so hard and so relentlessly that it tears a physical hole right through the side of the esophagus.
A perforation in that specific area is a catastrophic medical emergency.
I can imagine.
Think about the neighborhood we are in. The esophagus sits deep in the chest cavity, intimately surrounded by vital, delicate structures. You have the heart, the lungs, and major arterial blood vessels right there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If a hole is torn through the esophageal wall, aggressive bacteria from swallowed food and highly corrosive digestive juices can leak directly out of the digestive tract and pool into the chest cavity.
That sounds fatal.
It leads to massive, overwhelming infection and inflammation very quickly.
It goes right back to that outward radial force we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
The metal spring is specifically engineered to be tough enough to push open a hardened, stubborn tumor. But if the healthy, non-cancerous tissue surrounding that tumor is frail, perhaps heavily weakened by age, or compromised by previous rounds of harsh chemotherapy, it simply cannot withstand the relentless pressure.
It is a terrible mismatch.
Yeah. The tool is simply too strong for the fragile material it is pushing against.
And it demands an incredibly delicate balancing act from the medical team. You need to deploy a stent with enough radial force to successfully crack open the stricture, but not so much aggressive force that you compromise the structural integrity of the organ itself.
Right.
It is a razor-thin margin of error.
And then we get to the actual physical interaction between the metal mesh of the stent and the active biology of the growing tumor.
This part is fascinating.
The source material describes two completely different battleground scenarios based purely on the physical type of stent the doctor chooses to use.
Right.
It details the possibility in uncovered stents of tumor ingrowth, and for covered stents, the possibility of tumor overgrowth across the top and bottom edges.
This dichotomy highlights a massive challenge in material design.
Okay, let's break that down.
Let's look at an uncovered stent first. Mechanically, it is basically a bare metal mesh. If you look closely at one, it resembles a tiny, tightly woven chain link fence rolled into a cylindrical tube.
And because it is an open mesh with physical gaps in the metal, the video notes you risk tumor ingrowth.
Yes.
When I read that, I instantly pictured aggressive ivy or vines growing right through the holes in a backyard chain link fence.
That is exactly what it looks like.
So the physical stent stays exactly where it is, perfectly open, but the living tumor simply weaves its tissue right through the empty gaps in the metal and eventually fills up the inside of the tube anyway.
Yep.
The pipe gets blocked again, just from the inside out.
That is exactly how the biology operates. The tumor is constantly seeking expansion, and it simply exploits the empty physical space within the metal mesh. The path of least resistance happens to be right through the holes.
Nature always finds a way, I guess.
It does.
Yeah.
To combat this exact phenomenon, medical engineers developed covered stents. They take that exact same bare metal mesh but coat it tightly in a thin, flexible synthetic membrane.
Like a tarp.
Using your analogy, yes, it is exactly like securely wrapping a solid plastic tarp over the entire chain link fence.
Okay, so the logic tracks. A covered stent with a synthetic tarp physically blocks the tumor from weaving its way through the metal gaps.
Right.
The vines can't get through the plastic. Problem solved. The tube stays clear.
You would hope so.
Wait, doesn't it?
Tumors are incredibly persistent, relentlessly adaptable biological systems. They do not just stop growing because you put a tarp in their way.
No, they absolutely do not.
Exactly.
The source explicitly warns that for covered stents, you get overgrowth across the top and bottom edges.
Yeah.
Let's really think about what that means. If a patient gets an uncovered stent, the cancer eventually grows straight through the gaps.
Right.
But if the doctor gives them a covered stent to completely prevent that from happening, the tumor just alters its route.
It just goes around.
It climbs up the outside of the synthetic tarp, reaches the top or bottom lip of the stent, and then spills over the edge to block the tube from the ends.
Yeah.
It sounds like the medical team is trapped in a completely no-win scenario.
It certainly illustrates the frustration of treating malignancies. The tumor is a biological entity programmed for relentless expansion.
It just won't quit.
Right. If it physically cannot go through the wall because of the synthetic covering, it will simply ride the outer surface of the stent until it reaches the absolute end of the covered section.
Oh, man.
Then, following the path of least resistance, it will grow around the lip and spill right back into the center of the passageway.
Yeah.
It is actively attempting to bypass the static physical barrier entirely.
It is relentlessly, terrifyingly adaptable. Which brings us to perhaps the most fascinating and frankly the most cruel complication listed in the entire video transcript. It is a phenomenon called migration.
The ultimate paradox of medical success.
I want to make sure I get this exactly right. Dr. Raju's breakdown states, if the tumor that is holding the stent resolves or becomes smaller with chemoradiation, the stent can migrate. Think about the underlying physics for a second. We established that the stent relies on outward radial pressure. It needs the tight inward squeeze of the tumor to act as an anchor to stay exactly in place.
Yes, the outward force of the metal spring absolutely requires an equal and opposing inward force to lock the device into its geographical position.
Right, they balance each other out.
Exactly. The hardened mass of the tumor itself acts as the biological scaffolding holding the stent tight.
So the patient gets this stent deployed, it works, they can finally eat and drink again, which allows them to build up the strength to undergo brutal cancer treatments.
Which is the whole goal.
Right. They go through rounds of targeted chemotherapy and radiation. And the treatment actually works.
That's great news.
The medicine does its job and the tumor begins to shrink. It resolves. But because the tumor shrinks away, that tight inward squeeze is suddenly gone.
The scaffolding vanishes.
And the stent, which is now sitting loose inside the wider esophagus, simply loses its grip and slips down the digestive tract. It migrates out of place.
It is a profound, almost unbelievable medical irony.
It really is.
The very treatments designed to heal the patient and save their life, the chemo and radiation actively and successfully shrinking the malignant tissue, become the exact direct cause of the mechanical failure of the stent.
Wow.
The physical anchor completely disappears precisely because the patient is getting better.
The cancer treatment succeeds, and that very success instantly triggers a dangerous complication with the medical device.
Yes.
You literally cannot win a battle in one area without instantly creating a brand new puzzle to solve in another.
It perfectly illustrates why treating malignant obstructions is never, ever a simple set-it-and-forget-it mechanical procedure.
Right.
The human body is not static household plumbing. It responds aggressively to interventions.
It fights back.
Yes, tumors grow, they shrink, they seek new biological pathways. The medical team has to constantly observe and adapt to an internal environment that is literally shifting beneath their feet.
What an incredible journey we have just unpacked from Dr. Raju's procedural breakdown.
It really is remarkable.
We started with the universal mechanical concept, this incredibly elegant idea of a compressed metal spring relying on metal memory to autonomously prop open a blocked passageway.
Whether it is navigating the muscular esophagus or the delicate bile duct.
Exactly. And we explored the meticulous, almost entirely blind choreography required to actually deploy it safely.
The heavy reliance on laying down that single guide wire.
Right, and the counterintuitive necessity of removing the endoscope camera.
And that high wire tension of slowly, carefully pulling back the outer envelope while trusting nothing but tactile feedback and a two-dimensional fluoroscopy screen.
Moving right into the immediate, jarring physical reality of the human body, waking up and reacting to that new metal neighbor.
The visceral chest pain of the radial expansion pushing against living muscle.
And the sudden geographic bad luck of severe acid reflux, just because a natural physiological valve got mechanically wedged open at the G-junction.
culminating in that ongoing slow-motion biological battle. The catastrophic risk of outward radial pressure tearing a perforation through a chemo-weakened wall.
Yeah, the sheer biological persistence of a tumor either weaving its vines right through an uncovered metal mesh or relentlessly spilling over the top edge of a synthetically covered one.
And of course, that ultimate cruel irony.
The stent migrating.
Fallen completely out of place simply because the life-saving chemoradiation actually did its job and dissolved the tumor that was acting as the anchor.
It is a really breathtaking look at the chaotic intersection of static human engineering and the sheer, relentless adaptability of living biology.
It serves as a powerful reminder that every medical intervention is a complex negotiation with the human body, not a simple dictation of terms.
A negotiation. I think that is the perfect way to frame it.
Mm.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a fascinating final thought to chew on as we wrap up today's exploration.
What is that?
We have seen today just how relentlessly adaptable a tumor truly is. It will weave right through an uncovered stent like ivy on a fence, or it will slowly, methodically climb over the top and bottom edges of a covered one just to bypass the barrier.
It will always seek a way around a static physical wall.
Exactly. So if a purely structural defense, no matter how elegantly engineered, isn't enough to permanently stop it, how might the very next generation of medical devices need to evolve?
Oh, that is a great question.
Will future stents need to do more than just mechanically block a tumor with metal and plastic? Will they need to actively outsmart it?
Now that opens up an entirely new dimension of biomedical engineering to consider.
Something to mull over until next time. Keep wondering, keep questioning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.